Hello, welcome to the Raw podcast brought to you by the Sunderland Echo. My name is Jason Jones. I'm joined by James Copley and Phil Smith as always. Plenty to be discussing on this Monday morning, but of course there's only one place to start. We sat here last week, Phil, and we said that Sunderland's trip to Stamford Bridge was probably going to be the toughest test that they faced so far this season. I mean, in some respects maybe, but certainly didn't look that way, did it?
Well, it did for the first 8 minutes. When I thought I was going to pass out in the press box from panic. It was interesting. I thought the first 10 minutes there were a lot of similarities with the Man United game, and that in some ways it was really kind of cool and impressive that it was obvious that Sunderland weren't just going to try and put 10 players in their 6-yard box and hope for the best. You know, they thought about how can we be proactive, how can we actually cause Chelsea problems, and there were some signs of that in the first few minutes when Sunderland actually pressed quite high at times, but they were struggling to get the balance between when do we press high and when do we drop into a low block, and that's obviously where the first goal comes from. Kind of way too easy, really, when you're away from home against the side of Chelsea's quality. And that point, I wouldn't say panic stations, but you are thinking which way is this going to go. But this is kind of what Sunderland do, right? You know, they seem to be able to work it out on the pitch. They dig in, and from 15 minutes onwards, I just thought it was an excellent away performance. Chelsea didn't create loads. Sunderland really defensively good, but had a threat as well. It was a bit surreal watching a Sunderland team play that well away at Stamford Bridge. Is probably the way I would describe it. And by the end of the game, I don't think it was a smash and grab at all. I thought they deserved it. I thought they were worthy winners in the game. Didn't have loads of chances, but the chances they had were good ones. A really top draw performance. And that thing of, well, you haven't played anyone yet, you know, that's been put to bed now, hasn't it? It's not always going to be like this, but this was a proper good performance against a proper team. As I say, surreal's kind of the word I would use just about the whole kind of afternoon from 10 minutes onwards.
I thought it was interesting, James. Was it Ashley Williams on Match of the Day who said that Sunderland sort of dominated the game without having the ball? I thought that was quite an astute sort of reading of what happened in the capital.
Yeah, it's incredible, really, the way that Sunderland were able to bend that game to the will despite surrendering possession. I just think I really like this characteristic of Sunderland's team and Le Bris's tactical setup, whereby you can have the ball on the wing, that's fine, get it in the box, but we've got lads in the middle who are quality and we'll head it away and we'll hit you on the counter attack. I like that. It's sort of like laying down that physical battle, a bit of a marker, you know, like kicking to the corner in rugby, perhaps to get that physical line out. It just feels like Sunderland are so confident in their ability, especially defensively, and playing so well to the strengths. There's no point in Sunderland, although they can play with the ball from the back. There's no point of them trying to play out from the back and try and keep it tidy and pass all of the time, because ultimately that's not what this Sunderland team are strong at. They're strong physically, they can play a little bit as well, but credit to Le Bris. He got his tactics spot on for me. I think that's the first time he's ever gone 5 at the back, isn't it, from the start? And I think it was needed. Sunderland grew into the game, but just an incredible result, really. Probably the result of the past decade plus for Sunderland in regular league football. I would suggest it's absolutely extraordinary. To be honest, towards the end, when it got to the 80th minute, I was quite nervous watching it. And I was thinking to myself, God, if we get a point here, that's arguably the result of the season, in my opinion, away at Stamford Bridge. And then to go nick it is just incredible dreamland stuff. It's, just reward for a lot of Sunderland fans who, in October, over recent years, have been to Shrewsbury, they've been to Gillingham, all of these sorts of places. And now they're going to Stamford Bridge and winning 2-1. It's absolutely nuts. And I think the theme of the late goals as well, Jace, Sunderland have scored in the 92nd minute twice this season, as well as the 93rd and the 96th. And then if you go back to the playoff campaign, they scored in the 88th minute, the 95th minute, and the 123rd minute. So I think once or twice is maybe it's a bit of luck or coincidence, but I think that many times it starts to become a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy, and definitely deliberate in terms of Sunderland's fitness, Sunderland's mentality. So yeah, buzzing, really. I don't know if you can tell.
I think I think the main thing for me coming away from Saturday's game was, like, sometimes we aren't very good on the ball, And, it's impressive the way we're able to kind of suffer and, kind of pick our moments. The thing from Saturday was we actually were quite composed in possession. We didn't have a lot of in possession, but sometimes someone can fall a little bit in the trap of just kind of kicking it away, out of trouble. Actually, the way the team was set up was built to ensure that when we did win the ball back, we actually had options to play it short, to build an attack. That for me felt like a big step forward for the team. And that's probably the thing that I'm most enthused about coming away, is that we actually played some nice stuff. And yes, it was building from, defending our own box. But whether it was Hume pushing in field, whether it was Siddiqui carrying it away, Enzo drifting in field, we'd actually worked on patterns of play to play out properly out of trouble and create chances from it. And that's not something we've massively seen away from home this season. And that just makes you feel really good, right? Because it just tells you the team are well coached, and it tells you about the hard work that's going on and the ambition. So, away from just the limbs and like the buzz of the goal and stuff, when I actually sat back and thought about the performance, it was a massive one for me, because I can actually start to see the development of the team, if that makes sense, away from all the stuff we've rightly praised this season about set pieces and defending and resilience. There's actually a bit of construction going on here as well. And it's really, really exciting.
And I think as well, when that construction doesn't necessarily work for Sunderland during games, what is hugely pleasing is the work rate and the running. Like Noah Siddiqui was just everywhere again at Stamford Bridge. I saw a stat actually, I think was before the Chelsea game, that Granit Xhaka had ran more than anybody else in the Premier League, which just incredible for somebody who had his legs questioned when he came for Sunderland. So it does feel as that this team are progressing, and perhaps something that we've forgotten about because Sunderland have done so well is that this is a fairly new team, like 10, 11 signings, a lot of them gelling together, learning on the job, learning under a new coach, a lot of them in England for the first time, in the Premier League for the first time. So I think Phil's right to point out the work done on the training ground. The new coaches coming in as well in the summer. It's really, really pleasing to see all of that having come together and gelled so quickly. It's extraordinary, really, to have so many moving parts in one summer and for it all to go so well. It's beyond belief, really.
It is, isn't it? I mean, there's so much to unpack, but I kind of want to look at the way that Le Bris did set up, Phil, because we debated on the pod last week, would he go with a 4? We sort of leaned towards him probably sticking with what he knew. Sometimes I swear he listens to this and just does the opposite to make us look stupid. But he's gone with the 5 in the end. He's brought in Lucerel Gertrude for his first start. But it was a 5 at the back. But then, like you've sort of alluded to already, Trey Hume was drifting in field. There was stuff going on, wasn't it? It wasn't just your sort of standard, let's just sit in and see if we can see this out for 90 minutes.
The first 5 minutes was a bit like me trying to work out the new football manager, and like players just standing randomly in the wrong position as the opposition cuts through. No, it was an interesting one, because when I tried to get a photo, but I couldn't. But I think it must have been Soccer Saturday was on the little screen in the press box, and when the Sunderland team news came out, they put the graphic up, and it was like Trey Hume left wing back, Mukele right wing back, and then it was, so who will it have been? Ballard, Gertrude, and Reynildo as the back 3. And I looked at it and I was like, have they been given the tip that that's the team? I was like, what is going on? And then in the little warm-ups, Hume was in with the midfielders. When they go away and the back 4 do like the heading drill where the goalkeeping coach kicks it and they head it back. And Hume went over and the coach was like, no, you're in with the midfielders. And he looked a bit sheepish, like walking over to join Granite for the little passing drills. So it was quite interesting to kind of watch it all unfold. But it was very much, the idea was out of possession. It was 5-4-1. Trey Hume on the right, Reynildo on the left, Traore coming back to double up on Garnacho. And then in midfield, it was kind of Hume, as he used to do under Mowbray, pushing into midfield to try and give that extra outball to the defenders, so that rather than just having to launch it up the pitch, and Isidore's got like 3 defenders on his back, someone could actually build out. The first 10 minutes, it really wasn't working because Hume was getting caught high up the pitch and Traore wasn't seeming to be able to get him behind him. But they really sort of got to grips with it. It was really interesting. Both Le Bris and Reynildo both made the point in their post-match stuff when I spoke to them that Granite is massive for stuff like that on the pitch, being able to stop the game, if there's a set piece, or just kind of almost managing on the pitch. And I think that was another kind of factor. So it was really, as I say, the positive thing was it wasn't like, right, we're away at Chelsea, we're going 5 at the back, everyone just defend. And if we can, get a bit of luck from a set piece, we'll take it. there were times where Getroida was stepping into midfield to be a bit more aggressive in the pressing. So yeah, it was. I suppose it probably sums up, because we talk a lot about like formations and what formation they'll play. Probably sums up that's a little bit of a dated way to talk about it, because that's not really how coaches are managing anymore. It's in possession and out of possession. You almost have to play with two formations.
You can tell you've been playing the new Football Manager, Phil.
It's true. It's true though, isn't it? Because when we asked Le Bris about,
it is.
and for to be fair, since the start of last season, Le Bris used to get asked loads about, will you play a 4-4-2? And he says we play a 4-4-2 every week out of possession. Do you know what I mean? So, and I thought Saturday was a perfect example of that, and why I think Le Bris is like a very good modern coach, because it was very, very distinct. But that's what I liked most about it. It wasn't just, all right, we're going away from home, we're not going to have much of the ball. Let's just launch a load of defenders on the pitch and hope for the best, which is pretty much what we were advocating for last week. And there's a time and a place for that. But thankfully, Le Bris was able to add some slightly more sophisticated layers. I don't know if we're going to come to Getroida, but like, I just think it's genuinely funny that he was like 6th choice defender and he's just come in and played like that. Like, what is going on? And that goal, that winner, his run is just, I just love it. Like, I wasn't at the G game. I was at uni at the time, but I had my Martin O'Neill's saying, "Get forward, we can nick it here." When Broby's holding the ball up, and I look up, and Getroida is just absolutely flying past me down the pitch. And I'm like, what's he doing? And then it goes from that moment of like, oh, this is great. This is going to kill 20, 30 seconds. Like, this is a good bit of hold-up play. To like, oh my God, it's on. And then just as he cut the ball back, I got a massive elbow in my ribs from Scott Wilson of the Northern Echo, who said he's going to score here, which is the reverse of what happened at Sheffield Wednesday when Patrick Roberts scored in the last minute. And then it was just absolute chaos. So that's a total tangent. But I just like, when you have little like moments when you're at a game or following Sunderland, and you're just like, I'm never, ever going to forget that. I know I am never going to forget looking up and just seeing Getroida absolutely head down, steaming up the pitch, thinking we can actually nick this. It was class. Sorry, Jace, that was a massive tangent. But
the great thing about Getroida in that sort of action is that I am convinced that he meant that pass to Broby as well. He's definitely put some backlift on it. It's not just a hopeful punt upfield. Like, it is in a sense that obviously you're trying to clear the ball, but he's done that with Broby in mind, and it's pinpoint accuracy really. And I actually, when I was watching it live, Broby sort of looks like he's going to go through for a second, and he checks back, and I thought to myself, God, what's he done that for? But if you watch it closely, he's actually really unlucky with the bounce of the ball, and it comes back on him and prevents him sort of racing through. But to hold the ball up for, what was it, a minute and a half before Talbi arrived,
it felt like 20 minutes.
Absolutely sensational, and a proper throwback to some of the football we perhaps grew up watching. Old-fashioned centre-forward play, and a word for him as well, Broby, because I feel like in terms of the narrative surrounding him, not necessarily from Sunderland fans, but particularly from the Dutch media, he's almost been a little bit of a comedy figure over there, and they've been very critical of him. He's had a lot said about him. He's had some very well-documented personal issues when he was in Holland as well. He's come over here. He hasn't started immediately, but he's contributed and silenced a few critics there. I thought it was brilliant centre-forward player to have the wherewithal, to pick out Talbi, who's sort of coming into the picture late, but the weight of pass where Talbi doesn't even have to break stride, he just has to guide it into the corner. Fantastic finish, but I think Broby makes that goal perfectly. It was outstanding.
Yeah, it felt like a real moment where he sort of almost announced himself, didn't he? I think that one thing I sort of noticed in the aftermath of it, obviously everyone's streaking away to celebrate, and Broby's just sort of stood with his hands on his knees, looking a little bit knackered. You can tell that he's still not quite there, is he? That it's gonna take a while. There's gonna have to be patience. His fitness is gonna come in time, and I think that we're seeing.
I love the fact that Xhaka was celebrating before the ball went in. I thought it was just fantastic. If you watch the if there's a view from the Chelsea end of the counter attack, and Xhaka's got his arms up celebrating as Talbi hits the ball. Fantastic.
And look at LA too. He's sort of bouncing around on the halfway line, isn't he? And then it hits the back of the net, and he just streaks off as well. But yeah, like I say with Broby, it's like we were saying last week, and obviously some people have been calling for him to come into the side, but like you say in the Dutch media, there's perhaps been a sort of slight amount of doubt and potentially even ridicule at certain points. But I think ultimately what we saw on Saturday was that, this is what he's capable of. He's a different sort of striker. He gives Sunderland a different dimension, a different option at the point of attack. And if that's him operating, somewhere near where he could be at, once he's actually there, what can he bring to Sunderland? Because he is obviously a huge talent. He maybe did dip a little bit during the latter stage of his time in Ajax, but I mean, God, he could be really impactful, couldn't he, Phil?
Yeah, and I think there's sort of, when it was some of the things we were debating last week as well, I think there's a couple of areas on the pitch where there's been like discussions about starters and stuff. And actually, Saturday probably underlined the fact that we don't need to worry too much about it. We're actually in quite a good place in terms of like, there's no way, in my opinion, people might disagree, there's no way you can take Isidore out the starting 11. He's doing exactly what he's been asked to do every single week. Runs relentlessly, his holder play's improved a lot, nicking the odd goal. Runs himself in the ground for an hour and then he comes off. And if you feel you need Mayenda's sort of dribbling ability, his pace, you can bring Mayenda on. If on Saturday you feel like you need someone to get hold of the ball, Broby can come on. I think that's working. And the other one is Talbi is really unfortunate to be in the starting 11, right? Because he's doing everything right. But also the blend of, similar to Isidore, Enzo putting in a huge shift on the left, tracking back. Honestly, I feel like it is the thing you can only really appreciate if you're in the ground because the highlights just don't reflect it. Rhys James, other than set plays, did nothing on Saturday. And that's because every time he got the ball, Enzo was on him. The amount of run he got through was unbelievable. And then, so he runs himself into the ground and then you bring Talbi on and there's a little bit of space on the break and it's a scenario that suits Talbi. So I think there's a couple of positions where, yes, you could look at it and say, Broby maybe deserves a start. Talbi definitely deserves a start, but also like, actually, we're in a pretty good place that you feel like you've got kind of options to come off the bench and change the game. And this is something that like Le Bris is really deliberately trying to get across, isn't it? Because he talks about finishes all the time. He's trying to change the psychology, not just in the dressing room, but to us as well, to say like it's not a snub. It's always going to feel like a snub when you're not in the starting 11. That's just life. But I thought Saturday summed that up a little bit, that in most areas of the pitch, we do have a settled team and it's not the worst thing in the world if Talbi's coming on for 20, 25 minutes against tired legs. So he managed it perfectly on Saturday. It was a really impressive kind of afternoon of coaching from Le Bris.
I think it's fantastic just zeroing in on the strikers as well. Isidore, Broby and Mayenda, all very, very different, all offer very different things. And I think given where Sunderland have been in terms of strikers in the past, particularly in the Championship at times, I think that is hugely, hugely positive. And echo what you said about Talbi as well. He had a little bit of stick just after pre-season, didn't he? Sunderland spent a lot of money on him. He is only 20, but in terms of his last two games, he's come on and contributed. Obviously set up the second goal in the Wolves game, so gets a sort of de facto assist, although apparently that doesn't count according to the Premier League, which is a shame. And then he comes on and scores that. So it's nice to have these threats up and down the pitch. And we are 1 point better off than Leicester were at this point in the season during their title-winning charge. So it is on. Let's get carried away.
Yeah, I think was it Peter
I'm not saying we're going to win the league, by the way.
No, Peter Drury during the Everton match yesterday labelled Sunderland title chasing Sunderland. My ears sort of pricked up Batfink style, and I was like, "Did he just say what I think he said?" But yeah, with Talbi, I don't think it's any coincidence, is it, that that's 2 games running now where he's been instrumental in late goals. Like you say, so desperately unlucky not to be in that starting 11, because I think in terms of, not just his quality in the ball, and we've seen it in fits and starts, but his work rate's been pretty commendable as well, to be fair, over the early stage of the season. So he does deserve to be in that side, but he's almost making a rod for his own back, isn't he, Phil? Because when you're coming off the bench and you're having such an impact later on, Le Bris is probably looking at Everton on Monday night and he's thinking, well, why change? Why not have him as that, boost in the closing stage?
I said this on the whistle yesterday. He's almost played himself into a corner by being so good off the left, because it's easy to look at it and say, well, he's done really well the last couple of games off the bench, let's play him off the right. But then from a Le Bris perspective, if he looks at it and says, well, he's not playing as well off the right, so I'm potentially not getting the best out of him from the start, and then I've lost probably my most impactful substitute. Like, it just doesn't make sense, does it? So I agree with you. I think he's almost a little bit been a victim of his own success, because he's probably pushed himself down the pecking order in terms of a start. The flip side of it is that he's had a massive few weeks in
And that's the problem Talbi's got, isn't it? Really, that Enzo Lefebvre is just a sensational footballer. He's absolutely brilliant, as Phil mentioned, his work off the ball. But what he sort of gives you in terms of a little bit of control as well from the left, because he can really pass a football and keep hold of it. So it's a nice problem to have, isn't it?
It is, and it's sort of it's still quite an unusual problem to have, isn't it? I don't think we're used to Sunderland having such an embarrassment of riches all across the pitch. Speaking of which, interesting footnote as well, James. Obviously, Mark Gui started at the point of attack for Chelsea. I mean, I was so close to putting a fiver on him scoring because it just felt so unbelievably Sunderland for that to happen. Obviously, it didn't in the end, and he barely impacted the game. I know, obviously, Bris was sort of asked about the potential for him to come back in January on a potential loan, something like that. But again, we're talking about the profiles of strikers, and you know, Robbie very much looks to be that physical focal point that someone like Gui would offer. I mean, at this stage, does it feel particularly necessary?
Well, the irony is, of course, that if Guiu hadn't been recalled, then we probably wouldn't have signed Robbie, and then he wouldn't have done that at Stamford Bridge, which it's just backwards sometimes of how football works. You couldn't write some of the scripts that we see. I don't feel personally at the moment that there's any need for Mark Guiu to come back to Sunderland. He's a player I actually quite like. I thought he did all right for Sunderland. He's obviously very young, very promising. I did think he struggled up against Sunderland centre-backs who handled him pretty well, to be honest, on Saturday. You know, you always want to add goals to your team. You want to add options. You want to try and improve the team. But for me, I don't think it's necessary in January, and I suspect he'll probably stay with Chelsea, to be honest. I thought it was a big vote of confidence from Maresca, wasn't it, to put him in. He might not have sort of cemented his place in the team, but it's quite clear that they rate him quite highly, the amount he's played in Europe. So for him to get a first Premier League start, he came on at half-time, was it against Nottingham Forest as well, or in the second half? So it's quite clear that they're planning on using him. However, like Chelsea just tend to drop money like it's going out of fashion, don't they? So if they decide to buy somebody in January, he might find himself out on loan again. But I think it's good that the clubs have got a decent relationship and Sunderland handled that situation well. But I don't know what Phil thinks, but I just, at this moment, can't see it unless somebody gets injured. Unfortunately, I don't see the need for him.
Well, the big thing at the moment is Delap's back in full training this week. So that's, I think, is the reason why you see in Maresca and Le Bris not completely rule it out, because the reality is that I think Guiu is currently playing the Delap role, right? So in 3 weeks' time, he might be back to getting no minutes. And from Sunderland, Le Bris likes him. Why would you sit here now and say, oh, we don't want Guiu back? You know, that's not happening. Because if you mention if Broberry's hamstring goes or Isidor's out for a while or something, then it might make sense. Right now, I would say it has a very, very slim chance, because Sunderland have got 3 strikers who they rate. They're all their own players, so they don't want to bring a loanee in to kind of play ahead of these guys. So I just can't see it happening. But there is a very definite reason why nobody is publicly ruling it out, and that's because the reality is if Delap comes back and hits the ground running, Guiu's going to be back to square one, which is the whole point of why he came to Sunderland in the first place. So it's not one you can draw a line through. But I would agree with you, James. At the moment, I would say it's very, very slim, because at the moment, I don't think Sunderland have got any appetite to bring in a loanee to stop these guys they've got at the moment getting minutes.
He can only play for Sunderland and Chelsea this season, can't he? Because he's played for 2. So I suppose that we would be the only other option really if he wasn't going to play at Chelsea, wouldn't he?
Yeah, exactly. So that's why nobody's saying no chance, and that's why nobody can kind of say. But I would put it very, very unlikely. And he, to be honest, he was a nuisance in the first 10, 15 minutes on Saturday. But the thing is, he's in that team as a point of difference for Chelsea in terms of his physicality and his aerial ability. And unfortunately for him, he was up against Dan Ballard. In some ways, it was a bad game for him to try and make an impression, because Ballard just Ballard just did a damn Ballard, really. He just headed everything, kicked everything, just dominated. Doing what Dan Ballard does.
Yeah, as he is prone to do. I mean, I guess that sort of brings us back to the central defensive question, Phil. We spoke last week about this idea of meritocracy, and Dan Ballard couldn't get in because Mukiele and Alderete were playing so well. Gertrude has come in, dropped a bit of a barnstormer on his first start. Alderete obviously might be back, depending on concussion protocols for Everton. I can't believe I'm asking this, but how does Omar Alderete get back into this side?
I literally don't know. I'm not even going to try and come up with something this week because it's
bit of a headache.
Well, I mean, does what happened on Saturday just give the opportunity to say, well, why on earth would we take a risk with Alderete? If he is recovering from a concussion, I suspect you can maybe just kind of give him a bit more space to recover. I'd say the same thing I said after the Wolves game. You can't bring someone in ahead of anybody who played on Saturday. Reynaldo was exceptional, exceptional. Didn't make a mistake throughout the game. I know he lost the ball kind of in the run up to the opener, but defensively, and Maresca was doing everything to try and make something happen on that flank. So he moved Neto across to the left. Then he brought Estevao on, who I'm sure is a talent, but he just got absolutely no change out of Reynaldo whatsoever. So he has to play for me. Mukiele, Ballard, Hume, again, really, really good. I think sometimes there's this thing of maybe at some point Hume will lose his place. But you watch him play and you're like, why would that happen? He's doing really well. So I think it would be unbelievably harsh to bring Alderete in ahead of anyone who played on Saturday. The question is at home, whether you need 5 defenders and who drops out. Because I wouldn't like to be the guy who tells Geertruida he's not playing after that performance on Saturday. So genuinely, I have absolutely no idea what he'll do on Monday. None at all. It's going to be really interesting.
I thought Traore was much improved from his Wolves display as well, Jess. I thought, when that team news dropped at Stamford Bridge, there were a few sort of dissenting voices about Traore, sort of saying that they couldn't understand why Le Bris had persisted with him, but I actually thought he did really well.
Yeah, I thought he put himself about quite a bit better this weekend, to be fair to him. I still, if I'm being honest with you, I still think some of the quality on the ball, I still think he's got levels to reach, and that's not a criticism of him. I think it's just a reflection of the pedigree we know he's got. But in terms of his work rate and his, his willingness to stick to a brief, I don't think you could really fault him, to be perfectly honest. Obviously, huge part in the equaliser as well, which I think is worth noting. But I mean, all across the pitch, Phil, we're talking about the defence there. We've obviously spoken at length about the wingers and the options Le Bris has there. I mean, how important is that sense of competition in terms of keeping everybody sharp, keeping everybody at the top of the game and moving forward, knowing that if they don't play well, or if they do pick up a suspension or whatever it may be, they might not get straight back into this team?
Yeah, it doesn't feel like a coincidence that every time a defender comes into the team, he plays unbelievably well. And it's credit to these guys in terms of their professionalism, their attitude, all this stuff. But it can only be a good thing, right? That these guys are coming back in the team being like, if I'm not unbelievable today, I'm literally getting dropped because there's 4 guys waiting to come into the team. So I don't think it's a coincidence that everybody plays well when they come in, because as you say, it's at the moment, it's one bad game and you're kind of sweating over your place, aren't you? So the defensive depth is crazy. And I think Saturday was also quite a big day in terms of the whole AFCON thing, because there's probably a little bit of a template there, because defensively we are still going to have a lot of good players when we move into AFCON. I think when you look at some of the fixtures, I think Sunderland will take a lot away ahead of that period in terms of the fact that they've put a team out that they won't be far off being able to recreate during AFCON, and it's obviously gone pretty well. So I think that's a big positive. I know obviously 2 of the starters who will go, Reynaldo and Siddiqui, were both massive in the win on Saturday, so I'm not kind of downplaying that. There'll be big misses, but yeah, it does feel like the kind of underbelly of the squad is getting stronger, if you like, and it feels like maybe AFCON isn't going to be quite as... It is going to be a massive challenge, but it's another thing where you just think, actually, we may be looking a bit better shape than I thought we might have in August. And Geertruida is obviously a part of that, because he looks like he can play in 5 different positions and do you a job. So yeah, I think that competition is massive.
I think maybe the secret to replacing Siddiqui is just to put Dan Neil in ultramarathon training between now and January. Just
Maybe
take him
that's
out
what
for
they're doing.
that
maybe that's what they're doing.
You just
only
need to be
reason
fit for these 5 games, please.
Just make sure you can run 30 kilometers every game now.
We kind of said it before that game where we thought he might be in the Wolves game where we thought he might be injured, wasn't it? In terms of like, you can't replace him. So you have to do something a little bit different, whether it's, play with 2 6s instead or whatever. But like, he's just already one of those guys where you're like, it's pointless trying to go like for like, because remember when people were saying Sunderland overpaid for Noah Siddiqui? Lol.
Yeah, crazy.
My God, bargain of the century. Are you kidding me? How on earth did Sunderland manage that?
Did you see the moment in the first half when he plays a 1-2? I can't remember who it's with on the counter attack, racing forward, and he just ends up at the top of the pitch from Chelsea's final third. He plays a little 1-2 and he's just gone. It's just absolutely insane. The amount of running he gets through is ridiculous.
And Caicedo and Enzo Fernandez, like, they are top draw, like they really are. And Siddiqui did not look out of place even remotely. I thought, just as a slight tangent, but because like we always look through the Sunderland perspective, nobody asked him, but I'd be fascinated to know why Maresca changed centre halves, because that Josh Ashenpong, 19, like, when like you're watching a game and you're like, wow, like I'm making a note of this guy because I've just seen like a really special player. He was unbelievable. And he took him off shortly after Broby came on and brought Toshin on. I mean, I think Toshin's a really good player, but that just really unnerved Chelsea. It really unsettled their back line because Ashenpong, I think, for me, had been one of, if not the best player on the pitch up until that point. It'd be fascinating to know why he did that, because when you can just feel the mood of the game change a little bit, and all of a sudden you just felt like Chelsea could be got at. So that was a really interesting. There was a lot of like really good young players on show. Siddiqui was one of them, and Ashenpong, 19, like absolutely outrageous. He's going to be a massive player.
Can I just say about Garnacho as well? Like, my head would fall off if he was in my team, to be honest. Like, I would much rather have Enzo Lefebvre every day of the week. I know he scored and he did well for the goal, but defensively and some of his decision making, I thought in the game, it was like bordering on arrogance at times. And he did, sit and celebrate in front of the Sunderland fans. But he's quite clearly a talented player. Like, I remember that overhead kick he scored for United. Was it against Everton? He's brilliant in little phases of the game, but in terms of like a holistic 90 minutes, I feel like he goes missing at times. I couldn't believe what I was watching, actually. I just thought this, considering he scored the first goal, he had a bit of a stinker after that, I thought.
Give him 2 or 3 years. We'll get him through the Régis Le Bris Rehabilitation Centre, and it'll be all right. We'll wrap it up in a minute, Phil. But obviously, you're in the ground. Just a word on that away end as well, because certainly watching it from home, it felt like they were just non-stop, vocal, dominated the Chelsea support for 90 minutes pretty much.
It was 100% one of those days where it was a genuine factor in the result. And because I know, like, we'll always talk about the fans and stuff, but it genuinely played its part in the way the momentum shifted in the last 15, 20 minutes of the game, because the Chelsea end was flat, mainly because Sunderland's game plan was working. It's not criticism of the Chelsea fans. Ball was going out wide, no options, crossing into the box, Sunderland head it away, rinse and repeat. They were probably quite kind of bored watching that, but the way that Sunderland's that way end, you could feel them dragging the Sunderland team up the pitch. So I don't know if you remember, about 10 minutes from the end where we like crashed into about 4 challenges up the pitch. Hume joined in, won a throw in. Just it really genuinely did help swing the momentum of the game. And you could tell people were just having the absolute time of their life in there. It was really amazing, and it was something that was remarked upon by a lot of the non-Sunderland journalists who were there as well, in terms of how refreshing it is to have a team coming up like this with a support like that, making a real go of it. I imagine it is similar with Leeds, in terms of 2 like massive clubs who haven't had as good at times as they should have. But yeah, you're right to flag that, Jace, because it wasn't just good support; it was actually genuinely a contributing factor to the way the last 20 minutes especially played out.
And next up, James, obviously back in the Stadium of Light, Everton next Monday, week today. Some interesting footnotes in that one, isn't there? The return of Jordan Pickford, the return of David Moyes as well, obviously. I mean, another tricky game for Sunderland. But given the results we've seen, the performances we've seen, I mean, Sunderland must be at the point where they, you know what, we can be all right. We can go into games with confidence.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's a massive opportunity, isn't it? Because if Sunderland can win that game, because that's the sort of thing we're talking about now with this Sunderland side. I'm not saying we're expected to win it, far from it. It's going to be a tough one. You know, a huge battle. Everton are usually quite good defensively. I know they got done 3-0 by Tottenham over the weekend, but if you win that, suddenly you go on to 20 points before Christmas, and that's sort of beyond the realms of what anybody thought was possible, and would put Sunderland in a fantastic position going forward into a pretty tough run of fixtures. I mean, just looking at the table quickly at the moment, we are 12 points ahead of Forest, 13 ahead of West Ham, and 15 ahead of Wolves, who are 18th, 19th, and 20th, respectively. I mean, that's a big gap. It's not beyond the realms of possibility that could be reined in at some point, but it does feel like there's a considerable divide now between Sunderland and the worst teams in the division, which, for all we're talking about, you know, briefly going second, and I think now we sit in fourth. That's all any Sunderland fan is thinking about, really, isn't it? Is staying up. So I think it presents a huge opportunity. I think it's going to be a brilliant atmosphere at the stadium. Like, first night game in the Premier League, the club are flying, everything's going right, the team are doing well, and I hope we can sort of turn that into another good result. I'm just a little bit wary because I'm still scarred from the FA Cup quarter-final replay, which was a night game, and we all turned up with great hopes under Martin O'Neill, who played Kyriakos at centre-back, and I've never quite forgiven him because we lost, and Everton, I think, got the final that year and lost to Liverpool. So yeah, lots of history with Everton. We didn't we didn't seem to beat them for a long time, did we? With Tim Cahill popping up every now and again, but it'd be nice to see Pickford back as well. You know, I'm sure he's going to get a good reception as Jordan Henderson did when he came back with Brentford. First time Pickford's been back to the Stadium of Light. David Moyes, I suspect, won't get such a friendly reaction. It'll be the first time he's returned as well, won't it? So yeah, interesting. Lots to keep an eye on.
There is indeed. Well, that's all we've got time for on this week's show. Join us again next week when we'll be discussing all of the latest Sunderland news and developments. In the meantime, follow all the latest Black Cats news on the Sunderland Echo, or you can give us a follow on social media as well. Thanks to James. Thanks to Phil. Thanks to you for listening, and we'll see you next time.